Welcome tonight to our first conversation night. My name is Jason Walker. I am the community care pastor here at Expression 58.
Yes, you are. And my name is Michelle Lutz. Welcome to Conversation Nights.
Yes. We are thrilled to have you with us this evening. So, as I said before, this is our first conversation night. And the genesis of this evening kind of came from just a discussion among leadership and pastors here at the church at how there are so many controversial topics being thrown around out there. You see it all over the news, you see it on social media, and there's so many words being thrown out there, but not that much dialogue happening. There's a lot of shouting, there are a lot of posts, but we wanted to facilitate a time where we could actually have a dialogue, talk about it. And what better authority than the Bible to look to things that are going on in our world today, that are considered controversial and hot topic. How many of you guys believe that the Bible is still pertinent to the things that are controversial today? Right? So this is just an exciting time to hear from some of the leading Christian voices on the topic of pro-choice and pro-life. And this will be a time to just engage and really hear what God's saying about some of these issues that we're hearing about today.
That's right. And our heart really is to equip, empower, and give you ways to have these conversations in your own sphere of influence. We recognize that in a room this size that people come to a night like this with different experiences, different opinions, different perspectives. And our goal tonight is not to get everyone to agree. That's not our goal. We honor everyone and where you're coming from tonight. Our goal tonight really is to just empower you. It's to lean in, to learn to listen, so that we can understand how we can go into our communities and we can equip and support women in crisis. We can support the unborn, and we can support children in our communities.
Now, we are glad you are here with us tonight. We also want to say welcome to all those who are watching online at a later date. We're really thrilled and prayerful that what we present tonight will be something that will really equip you, as Michelle was saying. And also, as she was saying, this is an evening that we want to really focus on honor. Now, some of the topics that we're going to be touching on can have the tendency to create a sense of shame out in the world. They can bring people down, and we just want to encourage tonight to let go of shame. Know that shame does not have a place here in Jesus' name, but rather this is a place where we're going to explore this conversation through the lens of love, and that will be the focus of everything that we're going to present this evening.
Absolutely. Love is our highest goal here tonight. So let me just tell you how it's going to go. Tonight, our pastor, Jennifer Toledo, will be moderating with an interviewing an expert of panelists that will sit right here behind us. Our job as an audience is really to lean in and to listen. And the type of listening we're just asking everyone to do is the kind of listening to learn and not to wonder, gosh, how am I going to ask a question or to really get my point across? We don't want that kind of listening. We really want to glean and we want to learn tonight. So if you will join us in doing that, we would really appreciate it. There is going to be a time for you to have a voice. When you came in tonight, you were given these question cards. If you haven't already turned in a question, that's fine. We'll give a chance at the end of the first portion of the night to turn in those questions. We'll take a short break. Then we'll field through the questions. If they haven't already been asked, we'll give those questions an opportunity to be answered by our panelists. And then we'll come back and we'll do our last short session of answering those questions. So yeah, it's going to be great.
And as I said before, we will have prayer available throughout the course of the evening through this room where Mark, wave your hand, please, where Mark is. So if anyone at any point needs any prayer, if anything triggers someone and they just want to share it and handle it right in that moment, there's no shame, there's no problem with that. Just go over to where Mark is, and then also there'll be more time of ministry and prayer at the close of the program tonight. So I'm just going to pray, and we will get this evening underway. God, we thank you for who you are. We thank you that you invite us into a scope of love, that you know us intricately. You care for us, Father, and we just thank you that you are here with us, not just corporately, but here sitting with each of us who are here tonight, going through every emotion, experiencing it with us, Father, and holding our hand throughout the midst of it. I pray that this would be an educational night, that we would all just open our hearts, open our minds to something that is considered today a really controversial conversation. Let us see through your eyes, Father. Let us let go of anything that is not honoring, that is not through love, and let us just really facilitate your presence. Let your Holy Spirit run rampant in this room. Yes, Lord. Bless the speakers, bless the panelists, And I pray that you would just guide the tongues that are going to be sharing this evening. And we thank you that they're here with us tonight. In Christ's name I pray. Amen.
Awesome. And now would you help me welcoming our pastor, Jennifer Toledo, and our panelists of experts.
Well, we are so excited you guys are here this evening. We are just so thankful for this opportunity to that you guys would courageously go on the journey with us to have this conversation tonight. And as our team was sharing earlier, you know, we really started these conversation nights. We wanted it to feel like we were sitting around in my living room together, like we were sitting around the kitchen table together, that kind of a feel, because I feel like that's really where conversation takes place, right? Healthy conversation. And I think we've kind of lost that a bit in society with so much media, and the conversation has really changed. And so we wanted just to create a really safe environment and where we could come together as family and just really talk through these things. And so we're so excited to be doing this together tonight. And I have so much respect for each one of these women up here. And each one of them is phenomenal in the work they do, and they were chosen to be on this panel because just the voice they carry and the work that they're doing to bring solutions, not just, how many of you know it's easy to hold an opinion, right? But it takes a lot more work to actually get engaged on these issues, and they're doing a phenomenal job with that. So I'm going to have them introduce themselves in a moment, but I'm going to just tell you a little bit about each one of them. Right here next to me, I have Talitha Phillips. And Talitha, I'm going to tell you a little bit about each one. Talitha lives in Los Angeles and is the proud mom of two little girls, Riley and Adeline. Talitha first came to Claris Health as a client who witnessed the organization's life-changing work firsthand. And now, as CEO, she is in charge of vision casting, leadership, program development, and fundraising. She holds a BA in organizational communication from Pepperdine University and is a certified labor and postpartum doula. What she loves most about Claris is its holistic approach to care, the opportunity to journey with clients no matter what they choose, and then seeing lives impacted as a result. So before I introduce the rest, Talitha, will you just take a moment and just tell us a little bit about yourself and why you're passionate about this issue, what you do, why you're passionate about this issue.
Sure. Thank you. Well, as Jennifer just shared, I'm the CEO of Claris, and Claris means clarity or brightness. And I have this amazing opportunity to work with young women and men daily who are facing unintended pregnancies and offer medical and mental health and support services that are there through that decision-making process and then in those critical months and even years that follow, regardless of the choice that they make. So for me, I think I'm probably most passionate because I experienced that once myself and went to a place where I felt like I only had one choice. And so I'm really incredibly passionate about offering options so that women and men know that they're not trapped by their circumstance and that there's a hopeful future.
So good. And next we have Teresa Archer. And Teresa grew up in London, England, where her parents ran ministries focused on reaching those in lower poverty thresholds, starting elementary schools and rehabilitation programs. She graduated with a thesis with honors in English literature and art history from Vassar College. Did I say that right? I did. Spent the past 8 years in New Zealand, where she and her husband were part of a church planting team of Hope Center Tauranga, serving as worship pastors for 4 years. And currently, she's the managing editor of Darling magazine here in Los Angeles. So Teresa, tell us a little bit about yourself and why you're passionate about this issue.
Well, Darling Magazine, one of the reasons it was founded to talk about media that matters and kind of speak out to women and talk to them about living without degradation. And I always say that in today's world, everybody is a publisher because we have Instagram and Twitter. So women are being spoken to more than they've ever been spoken to before. And one thing that I'm really passionate about, and the reason I joined Darling, is because we want to speak a different kind of story to women who are being told they're not good enough, that they'll never be good enough. And this is just one more topic that's continually in rotation. It almost doesn't matter what we're talking about. This particular issue shows up. And it's such a central issue for how women feel about themselves, and also kind of what we place value on for women. So that's one of the main reasons that I'm so passionate about it.
That's good. Next, we have Rebekah Weigel. And Rebekah graduated with honors from Pepperdine University with a master's in psychology. She works as a foster care liaison and adoption advocate for Child Share, which finds homes for abused and at-risk children and provides essential support to foster and adoptive families. 2 of her 5 children were adopted from foster care, and she has a passion to inspire the faith community in Los Angeles to step up to the plate and care for vulnerable children. Co-creator of the inspirational short film, The Butterfly Circus, which some of you may have seen, starring limbless motivational speaker Nick Vujicic, did I say that right? Which has over 65 million online views in 33 languages and is currently in development as a major motion picture. She believes in the power of media to shape culture and is currently working on a feature film to raise awareness about the foster care crisis in America.
Yes.
So tell us a little bit about yourself, Rebekah, and why you're passionate about this issue.
Great. Well, thank you for having me. My name is Rebekah, and I'm currently working for Child Share. And Child Share, we believe that the best homes are in the churches. And so we go into the churches, we raise awareness in the churches about the foster care crisis. And for those who haven't connected the issue, these are the kids that were not aborted. So we currently have a crisis in LA County. There's more children in foster care right now in LA County than any other county in the country, and so we really need the churches to rise up. So I'm really passionate about seeing the church rise up and be the solution instead of just being a voice and just saying our opinion, but actually offering solutions for these children that need homes. And so we adopted 2 of our 5 children from foster care, and that's how I was introduced to Child Share. So I'm really passionate about this issue because of that.
And last but definitely not least, we have Kathleen Domingo. And Kathleen is the proud mom of 2 boys, ages 13 and 4, toddler and teenager at the same time, in a house filled with Star Wars Legos and Nerf guns. She's the associate director for the Office of Life, Justice, and Peace at the Archdiocese of Los Angeles. She's got a master's degree in theology from John Paul II Institute. She's the founder of One Life LA, an annual event in downtown LA that draws over 20,000 people to celebrate the gift of life. She's developed By Your Side LA, a comprehensive post-abortion healing program connecting women and men with resources for healing throughout Southern California. Phenomenal. We're so glad you're here. Tell us a little bit about yourself and why you're passionate about this.
Great. Well, I'm just so happy to be here. So I work for the Archdiocese of Los Angeles, which is the Catholic Church in LA. We represent about 5 million Catholics within our Archdiocese boundaries. And I really think the role of the church is about offering people hope. I think this year, more than ever, there's such divisive language in our culture that's being used. I think people are feeling boxed in. I think that we're having words, but not dialogue, as was said before. And the role of the church really is to offer hope, to cut through all of that like a knife and say, you know what? There's beauty and there's dignity in every single person. We know that, and that's the core of what we're doing, and everything flows from that understanding. So I'm just really happy to be here tonight. I think we're going to have a great combination of talks.
Yeah. So we're gonna start right into just some of these questions. We've got several questions we want to get through tonight, and then we'll have some time at the end to take questions from the crowd as well. I wanted to start off by saying all of these women love God. All of these women are phenomenal women of faith who are pursuing God and carry that into this conversation. And so there might be various perspectives or different things that they bring to the table, but I think it's important that we have that in the faith community, that we can sit down together and look at those various aspects. So the first question I want to start off with, it's kind of just calling the elephant out in the room, but what do you guys think about the labels pro-life and pro-choice? Are they helpful? Do you like them? What do you think?
I hate them. I think whenever you choose a label, you're assuming that the other side is the opposite. So when you're pro-life, you're saying that the other side is pro-death. And when you're pro-choice, you're saying the other people are against choice or anti-choice or maybe pro-consequence. But either way, you've taken a stance that is opposing through language, and I think that the problem with creating these distinctives is that subconsciously and consciously you are not allowing the other to have a part of the word that you've chosen, and therefore you have taken out choice from people who are choosing life, and you are taking life out of those who are choosing choice and actually destroying and speaking death into a group of people.
Yeah, I agree. I often think of it as either being baby-centered or woman-centered, and forcing people to choose between the life of the child or the life of the mom. And I think for me, I see this as being family-centered and drawing men back into this conversation, realizing that they are often a part of this discussion as well, and realizing that these decisions affect entire families. There's extended families, there's future spouses, there's future children that are also affected by these decisions. And so getting rid of the polarization of this and drawing us all into the conversation is where I stand.
These topics are so, these labels are so political, right? And I think sometimes people get caught up in that. Kathleen, maybe you can speak to this too, but I think one of the challenges with the labels is the stereotyping that comes, right? And so if you think of a pro-life person, you think of somebody who's out there, the stereotype picketing and hateful and mean, or if you think of a pro-choice person, you think of somebody who's, loves abortion, right? And those are really detrimental. And I'm going to hand this to you, but I want to just say this, is that in this conversation is, I have a lot of friends who are pro-choice, and I know that there are pro-choice people who feel this way, but all of my friends who are pro-choice are actually completely against abortion. They don't like abortion. They think it's a sad and terrible option but they're still pro-choice, right? So how would you speak to that in regards to these labels and the stereotypes, and how is that affecting this conversation?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think we notice that there's polarization. I would say more than anything, it's partisanship. I really think that that's what these topics and that's what these labels use. We just try to stay away from the term pro-life as much as possible because there's so much baggage. We've had 40 plus years of people yelling at each other and holding signs and screaming, and every time you see anything in the news about pro-choice and pro-life, you see the signs and you see the yelling and you see actually a lot of hateful things happening, right? So what we want to do is we want to create opportunities for people to come together, to actually learn from each other, to actually speak about love and hope and change and what we can do together. And I think those polarities just break us apart, right? That partisanship breaks us apart. So we try to cut through that and say, this isn't a partisan issue. This is about people. How do we live as people? How do we love? How do we show hope as people? And so one of the things, this was a conversation for us for about a year prior to creating One Life LA, the event that we have in downtown LA. We never used the term pro-life, and people said, what do you do there? And we said, come and see. And the idea is to create for people an opportunity to see what it means to be a people of hope and a people of love and a people of life. And what does that look like? And then have that vision without using these labels that have so much baggage with them.
I think you bring up a good point. Just how political these labels have become and how polarizing they are. And so I don't want to spend a lot of time talking about the politics of this, because we really want the heart tonight is to really get into the issues and how do we become part of the solution. That's really where we're going. But I do here at the top want to just take a moment and talk about the politics very briefly, just so people, I think, we want to get educated. We want to know kind of how this works. So my question is, what do you guys, from your perspective, what do you wish people knew about the politics? What are Republicans or Democrats doing well in regards to this issue? And how do government programs actually help or fail to help? And what types of policies would you suggest? I know it's a lot.
So I have the mic, so I'll start, and then
Great.
I'll pass it to my sisters
Perfect.
over here. I think Republicans are doing a good job in kind of keeping the abortion issue alive, right? Right, and we've made some strides recently. We're talking about Planned Parenthood defunding, and there are certain things that we can be a little bit proud of from that perspective, I think. I think that also, though, rightly, we have to own that we can be perceived as anti-woman or anti-family sometimes, or anti-even born child. We have to own that. So then we look and we say, well, okay, well, what are some other things that we can do, right, that are good? What kinds of policies? We talk about things like paid maternity leave. That can make a huge, huge difference in the life of a mom, right? If you cannot afford to take 6, 12 weeks of unpaid leave from your job, you cannot do that, and you get pregnant, that would be a huge decisive factor for you. Are we as a people doing something to help women? Are we helping families make a choice for life through our policies? So that's, again, where I think partisanship can play a role, and we have to look beyond that and say, I might have to cross the aisle either direction and join forces with people that maybe I don't agree on everything with for this particular policy issue that can help foster life.
So she took the Republican answer. So let me see the Democrats, what they're doing well. I think living in a city like LA, the idea of getting rid of government programs is crazy. I think, working with women who at times need welfare or need housing and seeing the resources that we do have in a city like LA, I think there is good that comes from that. I think looking at healthcare, needing maternity leave, Medi-Cal, women who get pregnant and are on Medi-Cal, they need assistance so that they can give birth, so that their children can go to the pediatrician. So I think that, like Kathleen said, it can't be a one or the other. I think we have to find ways to work together, especially when it comes to healthcare, maternity leave, paid maternity leave. And then I think there are some states that have added some laws that help reduce the number of abortions. So you look at some states that have parental notification, or a minor child has to notify some adult before they undergo this procedure, or a waiting period. Some states say you need to be fully informed, so you need to have an ultrasound so that you can make sure it's a viable pregnancy and the pregnancy's in the uterus, and those are helpful things. And then they want you to take 24 to 48 hours to consider this choice. I think there are some things at a policy level that can help reduce the number of abortions.
You bring up a good point, which, reducing the number of abortions, I many times want to ask people, especially the Christian community, is your primary objective to have abortion just not be legal, or is it to actually stop abortions from happening? Is it actually to see that number go down? And because depending on what your goal is, right, your approach to getting there is very different. I think some people are so focused on just it not being legal in America or whatever that they're actually not realizing there's a total other pathway to get to reducing the number of abortions. With that, this is not going to be a surprise to any of you up here, but during this past election, there were many evangelical Christians who felt like a Republican taking office was a big win for the pro-life movement. Many people were saying this is a one-issue election, and their vote was about one issue. Can you guys, for us, and all of your wealth of wisdom, break down how the Supreme Court works in regards to Roe versus Wade? Briefly, Roe versus Wade. If we've had a conservative majority for decades and Roe versus Wade has never changed, how is putting another conservative Supreme Court justice in there going to change anything? Do you think Roe v. Wade will be overturned in the near future? You're so glad you have the microphone, aren't you? What happens if it does? What if it does overturn? What does that mean for us? And how does that affect California? And
this is a never-ending question.
This is never-ending. It's the big fat, help us understand, why I think we make it one really simple thing. We heard people during the election say, wow, a Republican's in office, we've won the the war against abortion, and it's like nothing's changed, right? So help us understand how that works. That's a big question. You got it.
Okay, ready? I'm going to
Pray
talk
for her.
fast. No. Yeah, pray for me. Okay. So, because this is being recorded for posterity's sake. Okay. So this particular election, I think people saw the binary on abortion maybe more so than they ever have, right? Now we can argue all day long about who said what and were they truthful or not. That's not the issue. Okay, so a lot of people, you're right, I think in the faith community voted a certain way because their conscience compelled them to vote that way for the abortion issue, right? And so then you have to follow your conscience when you're voting, and so that's great. Now what do we do? Now what are we left with? So just on this one issue, now I'm not talking about any other issue, let's be totally clear on that. Just on this one issue, we seem to be making a little bit of progress. Are we making the right kind of progress? I don't know. The Supreme Court is tricky. The justices that have been appointed by pro-life Republicans, the justices who are sort of pro-life going in, right, they obviously can't be partisan, have not really done a great job for us on the life issues in the past, right? So it's always tricky to pin all of your hopes on the Supreme Court. Also, let's be very clear that if Roe v. Wade were overturned tomorrow, that's not changing hearts and minds. The law is a teacher, for sure. We know that 100%, but it doesn't change the hearts and minds. There was just a great article in, I think, the New York Times the other day about Plan C, right? And about mail order RU486 drugs. It's increasing all over the place. We have places in the world where abortion is illegal.
What is that? What is that?
So there are companies now that will ship RU486 anywhere in the world, right?
Which is what?
Oh, RU486 is the abortion drug, so the mifepristone. So they'll send them by drone into countries where abortion's not legal. They have ships that'll pull up outside of your country, and you can take a little boat out there and have abortion on the ship. I mean, there are ways that people are doing this, right? And the reason is we're not changing hearts and minds. We need to get people to see they don't want that because they feel loved and supported and hopeful and happy about life. So the political solution is a possible solution. It would be helpful if we enact laws that restrict abortion. It would be helpful because the law is a teacher, right? But it will not solve the ultimate problem unless the culture embraces a different view of life. Did I answer all of it?
I agree. Good answer. That was really good. How do we get the culture to embrace life, though? And how do we shape dialogue in our culture? And that's something I'm really passionate about with media, because I feel like media is so influential in our culture of shaping the next generation. All of us, are influenced by what we watch, what we see. So I'm a big advocate for more television, movies, PSAs, things that can help shape dialogue and get people talking. I think that's one way. But I think that the dialogue has been so, polarized too, that you can't really even talk. I mean, that's why it's so good that we're talking here, is because it's just, everyone's scared to have an opinion because you have your opinion and everybody shoots you down and, labels you and puts you in a corner, and I guess you're not my friend and I don't like you and you're not kind or compassionate and if you don't believe like me. And so I think it's not a moral issue, it's become a political issue. And I think we have to return the dialogue to this being a moral issue, because all of us have a conscience in our heart of what's right and wrong. And so if we can get people to start thinking not about it being, it's not a political issue, this is a moral issue.
Yeah, I would just add to that I think that the dialogue for women has been that they want to be protected, and the Democratic Party has done a really good job of reaching out to women and talking to them and sort of supporting them and saying, hey, we care about your rights, we care about your history, we care about 2,000, 3,000, whatever many thousand years of general oppression, and therefore we hear you and we want to take you into our fold. And so women have felt a lot more loved and seen by the Democrats than they have by the Republicans, and I think that we can see that in voting statistics. And I think you're crazy if you don't see the humanity of people choosing parties for who they feel heard by, because I think we saw that with this last election. Obviously there was a huge group of people who felt heard and seen by Trump. Whether or not we relate to that as women or anybody relates to that is irrelevant, because people did. And women feel, I think in general, very heard by that party. It's unfortunate that this has become an issue solely about women, because it isn't. Just as Talitha was saying, it's about children and it's about men. But the unfortunate side of this politically is that men are disregarded, children are disregarded, and women are told this is about the fact that you've been oppressed. And so there's a lot of anger, and there's a lot of historical anger that comes into the dialogue that's sort of like this huge elephant in the room. And unfortunately, everybody's talking about the elephant and not the actual issue at bay.
So Talitha, if Roe v. Wade is overturned tomorrow, does abortion go away?
No. I mean, I think sometimes we forget that there was abortion before Roe v. Wade. And I think it goes a little bit to the culture question of changing hearts. But I think, too, to think about, sometimes I ask myself, what would happen if it was overturned today? You know, we're in California, you watching might be in Texas, Oklahoma. I mean, we all have a different answer for that. And I think, practically speaking, in Los Angeles, we would probably see an influx of abortion because it would just turn it back to the state, which means Arizona and New Mexico and others would be coming to California. So the big question and answer I'm always left with is we need to find more ways to support women and men through these decisions so that they don't feel like they have to have abortions. And I do a lot of work in Uganda where abortion is still technically illegal. And it's the same heart issue is I don't feel supported enough to make this choice. I feel like abortion is the only choice that I have right now because of my circumstances. So to me, it's just a challenge of, regardless of what the law says, what are we doing so that people don't feel like they have to make that choice?
I think that's so good, right? Because I think as Christians, so often we put so much energy on the legality of it. And the reality is, like you said, if Roe v. Wade, were overturned tomorrow, it goes back in the hands of the states. For those of us in California, it's still going to be, even then, abortions are going to happen. We can't, it's, once again, back to the question, what's our primary objective? That it not be legal, or that we're actually healing the issue, that we're actually bringing solutions, right? So that's great. So what are some do's and don'ts? This is a good one. Pay attention. What are some do's and don'ts for Christians engaging in this conversation?
Well, I will start. I can start there. Especially as being a woman who has had an abortion, I didn't go to the church when I was 19 and pregnant. I didn't even think to go to the church, and my parents were missionaries and Christians and just overwhelmed with shame and guilt. And so I think part of the do is start talking so that the me in the audience says, oh, that's a safe place. I could go there. I think when we talk about abortion, we so often, on the don't side is we need to stop, in my mind, talking about issues and start talking about people. The fact that this isn't an issue. This is just something that many of us in this room, I mean, we estimate about a third of you in this room and watching have been where I've been. And it's not that we make these choices because we don't want to have children. I wanted to have a baby. I would have loved to have had a baby, but I didn't feel that I could do that. And so I think that talking about it, I think talking through story, through hopeful stories. My life didn't end when I made that decision. It's something that was very difficult for me, but it is what actually drew me back to God in the end. So I'm so thankful that His loving mercy was there for me and that I can help others, either preventing on the prevention side or in the healing side. And I think just being vulnerable as a church, not speaking from this is what God says we should do, but also, gosh, we are all really broken people. And my brokenness may be different than yours, but that's why I love you and I'm here for you and I can understand why you would walk in those shoes.
Good answer, Talitha. I think, like Talitha's saying, like coming from a place of compassion, like I feel like as a Christian church, like it's easy to put down our flag and fight for what we believe, especially when we feel like our rights are being assaulted or, we're being silenced. And I think that's where the church kind of rose up and was like, we're not going to be silenced. But I think in the middle of that, we end up alienating and isolating people and ourselves and not being the compassionate, welcoming people that we should be for people in our communities that need us and need help. And some of the recent statistics do say that I think it's like 4 out of 10 of the women who get abortions say that they are active in a local church. And so some of the women in the churches, a lot of them are the ones going and getting abortions and don't feel safe and don't feel like they can go to the church and get help. And so we need to offer that hope to them and the solutions and say, we love you, we're here for you, and we want to help you.
I'm going to say this, Talitha, you mentioned that, in our conversation that in your guys' clinic, many times you'll have Christian women, women in ministry, worship pastors, women coming in who come to get support because they're in crisis and they're not going to the church because they're not feeling safe or valued there. And so it's a big issue inside and outside of the church. Yeah. Can you help us, Kathleen? Can you help us understand who is having abortions? And any, give us a picture of, I know there's obviously a diverse group of women that are having abortions, but I think it's changing, right? It's morphing. We do know some statistics. And then my question is the pro-life movement adjusting to help meet the needs, those changes?
Yeah, I think that's a really important question. So, statistics are what they are, right? We know for sure in California it's not a reporting state, so we have no statistics on California. But I'll just give you what I've learned, what you can find out from Guttmacher Institute. So we know for sure that 60% of women who choose abortion already have kids. We know that about half are repeat abortions, so they've experienced abortion before. The statistics that we see are about 75% of women are in poverty. So again, those statistics are the ones that we have them for, right? So we're looking at that and we're saying, okay, this is not the erstwhile teenager story, right? That so many people think of when they think of abortion. This is a mom. She's older. She's in poverty, right? She may have had previous abortions before, to the point where Planned Parenthood actually puts signs up in their waiting room that says, please don't bring your children in the waiting room. That's how often moms are going into the clinics, right, looking for abortion. So, have we changed our approach enough? I don't know. I think that, these ladies do the direct service up here. They can answer that. But I would say from the perspective of the churches, we know for sure that these are women in our pews. They're in our churches. They have kids. They have families. And they feel like this is their only choice.
Wow. You bring up a really good point, poverty. Ladies, how is poverty related to this issue? And is it possible to affect this issue without addressing issues of poverty?
I'll speak to the foster care system because it's related, I believe. I have pages of zip codes because I meet with churches and pastors and leaders all over LA, and I look up their zip code to see how many kids are in foster care in their area so that I can say this to them and tell them how many children have been detained in their area. And when it's in a wealthy, affluent neighborhood, the number is usually 0 or 1. And when it's in Compton or Inglewood or, even parts of the San Fernando Valley, the numbers are through the roof. And so clearly the foster care issue is a poverty issue, and these are the kids that are poor. These are the ones that don't have a lot of hope, and sometimes they're aborting, sometimes they're giving their children up, or their children are being detained. But I think from my perspective, it's clearly an issue of poverty. But you guys could speak more to the pro-life.
I think I have a little bit of a hybrid answer between is the pro-life movement adjusting and then the poverty. I think one of our clinics is in Inglewood, and the communities that we serve are Watts and Compton and South LA, a large portion of South LA. And I would say one of the greatest challenges is there is not a lot of holistic care, physical, emotional, and spiritual, especially for people in poverty. And so to have a model that says, we're going to give you a pregnancy test and an ultrasound, and oh, look, you're having a baby, and please go have that baby, that does not help. That is not what people need today, especially in poverty. They need wraparound services. They need to know that you're going to find resources for them. And it's building a network in a community that says, okay, somebody walks in, she needs a place to live. Her boyfriend was just murdered. I mean, these are real stories, last week. She has other children that are in foster care. She needs court-ordered parenting. She needs diapers. She doesn't have food. So we can't open a facility that just is a triage facility anymore, right? Like, we need these comprehensive care facilities that say, you come here and we are going to help you with all your needs, regardless of the choice that you make right now. Because she's coming to you with a problem, but it's just a symptom. And we have to stop treating symptoms and start going to the problem. So to me, like, to really get at the heart of, is poverty related to abortion? Absolutely. Look at where the most abortion clinics are located. They're in poverty-stricken communities. So instead of picketing them, why don't we set up organizations that can actually be part of the solution and work with them and say, oh, you have women that are coming here, you know, they need this, this, and this. We'll send them to us for all of that. So that's been sort of the model that we've been implementing, and it's very successful. I will say it is so successful because they feel loved and cared for, and it's not about what she does with that baby. We care about that, but we also care about her whole life and her whole family.
Wait, Talitha, before you pass that, will you tell us a little bit about some of the services and programs you guys offer at Claris?
Yeah, so we do the medical, so we do the early prenatal care, we do STD testing, so we service a lot of men as well. We do therapy, so ongoing mental health services. We have doula services, parenting classes, ongoing assistance. So if they come to us and need food or diapers or wipes, they get that. We have a prevention program, a sexual health education program that works on prevention. And then we have over 80 community partners that we work with. So if somebody comes in and they need legal or housing or whatever it is that they need, it's not, oh, there's a place over there. It's, we're going to call Sherry and she's going to meet you tomorrow. And, oh, you don't speak English, we have a translator that's going to go, and because she speaks Chinese. And so it's that type of care. And then if somebody chooses to parent, we're there for the first 24 months. So we see them weekly or monthly with ongoing case management. If she has an abortion, she can come back to us, and we're there for sometimes years after an abortion. And then the adoption, which hopefully we'll get to as well, just talking about adoption in a healthy way and presenting adoption as a viable option is a huge, especially in the poverty communities, no one talks about adoption as a viable option. Foster care, we talk a lot about foster, but nobody talks about making an adoption plan or choosing to place a baby. So that's another big part of what we do.
This just makes me want to weep, just hearing her. This is the kingdom of God. That is the kingdom of God at hand. And to me, that is so powerful because I feel like it's so easy for somebody to have an opinion, right? And somebody to say, don't have an abortion. And it's a whole other ballgame to get in there and to find somebody wipes, to find somebody, a translator, to walk with them. That's Christ. Walking with people for the long haul. That is how you see transformation. That is how you see these issues be affected. And this is exactly what the body of Christ is called to do. Give this woman a round of applause. So good. Well, I would love for you guys to speak to this. What would you say to somebody in this room or somebody watching who's had an abortion or is contemplating having one? And how do we navigate this when we find ourselves in a situation with a friend, with a coworker, with a sibling who is wanting to have an abortion. What's helpful? What's not helpful? Be our boss. Tell us what to do.
I bet we all have opinions on this. I think what isn't helpful is making it an argument or an intellectual debate, and fact giving is not helpful, as though people don't know what babies look like. And you're talking to someone in crisis, and what's strange about this topic is we kind of do click into intellectual mode. And it's almost like talking to a smoker about lung cancer, where that's not the reason that they're smoking. It's not going to stop them from smoking. And similarly, I've been in this position talking to somebody, and I just realized when she said, I'm contemplating having an abortion, I just felt so struck, and I had all these statistics and all the facts, but in the moment I just realized, I just heard the Lord say, what's her heart? And I think we need to make it about the heart, basically what Talitha is saying, because it isn't a war. And when someone is in that moment, they are in crisis.
Yes. I agree. I mean, I think that what Talitha is saying is so important to this, because I think a lot of times when you're in a desperate situation, you just need help. You need support. And if the church was really rising up and being the support, and we were there for them, and we said, we'll help you. Come live at my house. I have a spare bedroom, and you can live there, and I'll help feed you and clothe you and take care of you, and I'll help pay your medical expenses. But how many people in the church are really doing that? I mean, I'm not seeing it. And I think there's some, but we need more of that. We need to rise up as a church. We need to get our hands dirty, and we need to say, we need to be the solution, and to stop putting labels on people, stop shaming people, and start helping them, and start showing compassion with our actions.
I want to just add to that. To do that, you actually have to know people in crisis. Exactly. You actually have to be friends with the poor. You actually have to be friends with people who live a different life than you do, right? Yeah, that's good.
I just want to touch on the women who have had abortions, because we haven't touched on that one yet. I think that, what we would say, what we would do, it depends on how well you know this person, obviously. But I think one thing that's really important is just to affirm the experience, whatever it is. So often women after abortion, or anyone actually who's experienced abortion, they have feelings and they don't know what to do with them. And very often they don't know where they come from, actually. They're not linking them with the abortion experience. Because in our culture, we tell women abortion isn't a thing. It's not anything to be worried about. It's not even a thing. It's not a big deal. So it's very difficult then to connect those two. And so I think very often what you have to do is just be there. Just be a friend. And just say, even though you might kind of in your head say, oh, I bet it's the abortion, she might not be able to hear that yet, right? So what we've found through our experience, and Talitha, I know you do this a lot as well, is very often that very first call comes in, and it's a call of, something's been bothering me, and I just want to talk to somebody. And they don't ever even get around to talking about the abortion at first. It really takes a while to develop trust and to develop a relationship before they get down to that. And so I would just say that, that encounter, that culture of encounter that we want to build, this is really where it plays in it. And when people go through that process and they come out healed and whole on the other side, they're unstoppable. I mean, they see something beautiful about life that the rest of us can't always see, and they see something joyful about Christ that the rest of us just don't always see on the same way, and it's amazing. And it's really something to be so excited about being part of that process.
So my next question is, how can we be passionate about protecting the rights of the unborn and passionate about the rights of women? How does someone who is pro-life work to protect the needs and rights of women? How can we defend the unborn and still help women to be powerful and feel in control of their own lives? Can we have both? Can't we do both, right? I believe we can. So what does that look like? How do we be pro-women's rights and pro-rights of the unborn? Such deference happening up here.
I'm appointed.
You.
I absolutely think you can be both. I think to be pro-woman is to be pro-child. I think if you ask any woman, because we often will say this, like if all obstacles were removed from your situation, what would you want to do? And she says, I would want to have a baby. And I think that there is that innate, I mean, we were talking in the back earlier, some people were talking about how that decision of if you were pregnant and somebody said, do you save me or the child, and how most husbands are like, oh no, I want them to save you, and most women would say, no, save the baby, and how there is just this like fighter in you often when you're pregnant to want to protect that child. And so I think by loving her and acknowledging her and asking her questions. I mean, one of the greatest things to say to somebody when they're facing an unintended pregnancy is just nothing, just to ask good questions and let them talk, and then be a part of the solution. And so I think also being pro-woman, you say to the woman, I'm going to be here regardless of what you choose, but what I hear you saying is, you really would do this, and I want to be here to support you through that. So it's not a passive, we often hear men will say, I'll support you regardless of what you choose. Like, that just says it's your choice, and you go deal with it, and that's excusing you from the equation. So there's an active way to say, I'm going to love you no matter what you do, but let's figure this out together. Let's figure this out, because I know deep down you want this. That helps.
Yeah, and I think we have to start refusing language that pits them against one another. And we can say, I'm pro-reproductive rights, or I'm pro-healthcare for women, and I'm pro-children being born, and you should be able to have all of those things. And unfortunately, because of it's the political spirit, it's the politicalization of this issue that has made us somehow believe that you have to choose a camp. You have to choose children or women. And those are two fragile groups of people that even biblically, the Lord had his heart after the widow and the orphan constantly. And so unfortunately, it's strange in the church that we're like, yeah, I'm pro-children no matter what those women do. And that's not a biblical response. It's not a holistic response. And so I think it's important that we, even with our verbiage, because words are so important, and they create, because God could have made the earth with nothing, but he spoke. And so with our speech, we need to be pro-women, and with our speech, we need to be pro-child.
That's great. I think, too, if we're honest, I don't think that the church has been real pro-women throughout history. So just to put it out there. We still have churches where I can't even share about foster care from the stage because I'm a woman. So there's churches where I can't meet with the pastor, but definitely not speak in front of the congregation. And so, in my personal opinion, we still have a lot of work to do in the church with women's issues in marriage, women's issues just in leadership in the church, and giving women a voice and feeling like they're valuable. And I think about James, where it says true religion is to care for the orphan and the widow. And the orphan didn't necessarily mean both parents. It was a lot of times even if they had lost one parent, because one parent, if they lost their father especially, they were very vulnerable. And even in our culture today, I mean, if it's a single mother, that's really what the Bible was talking about when it said the orphan and the widow, because he's talking about who are the vulnerable ones in your society, who are the ones who have been cast out, who are vulnerable to all of these different things. And single women who have children are more likely to be in poverty, they're more likely to be abused. The statistics show that they are the vulnerable ones. And so as Christians, as people who want to have true religion, we should be caring for them, and we should be giving up our lives for them and helping them.
It's good. It's so good. I think you bring up a good point where, how it's been so, these things have become so political. And I think as believers, it's important that we help kind of steer the conversation away from the politics, right? Because, the political spirit really stands in direct contrast to justice, because justice is God's government, and the political spirit is about man's government. And I think so often how the enemy wants to bring this conversation and make it about the politics. And we have to pull it back into the realm of the kingdom of God. It's about people, it's about lives, just keep pulling it back in. And so that's, yeah. Rebekah, can you speak to abortion versus our foster care system? What would you say to somebody who argues that our system is so broken and children endure so much trauma, maybe it's just better that they go straight to heaven? There's a lot of statistics that we know about children in foster care, right? We know that children in foster care predominantly are huge targets for trafficking, for jail, death. There's all these crazy statistics. It's not a good system. So how would you answer that question?
Well, I definitely think, there's people say the system's broken. And in LA County especially, we have such a crisis that the system is overrun. It's really challenging for foster families who are trying to foster and adopt, and that's what we do. We help walk them through the whole process and hold their hand and guide them through the process to help them. But what we find is that when we find really good families in the churches, and that's what we do. We recruit in the churches. We believe the best homes are in the churches. This is the church's responsibility to be caring for these children. When we find good homes and the children are placed in good homes, the children tend to thrive because those homes believe in these kids. They have hope for them. They don't move them. A lot of the trauma of foster care is when children are placed in foster care, and it's traumatizing for a child to be placed in foster care and ripped away from their family. But then a lot of times they're put into homes where the people don't care about them. Some of the county homes, they're doing it for money. They don't care. They're just doing it to collect a paycheck. And so when there's a problem with the child, they just move him to the next home, and then the child endures trauma after trauma after trauma, and that's where they start to shut down and their heart starts to shut down. But what we find is when they're placed in a really loving home that loves them and they find security and they belonging, they tend to thrive and they tend to do really well. And so we see lots of redemptive stories of amazing, hopeful stories of kids that do really well. And so I believe there's hope for every human life. I believe every human life has value. I believe most people in the church believe that. And we should be the ones that are the advocates for that are stepping up, and we're caring for these kids so that they have hope and they have a future.
I agree with you, but my question is, but why aren't Christians doing this? Because, we sat down with DCSF here in LA County, and I was heartbroken to hear a county agent tell us, they said, of all of of LA County, the hardest population of people for us to get to take in children are middle class and up Christian, evangelical families. They don't take in the kids. And I was so heartbroken, right? Because this is our inheritance. This is who we are as people of faith. And for those of you who don't know this, state of California is phenomenal. I don't know what other states do this, but state of California will actually continue to pay you even if you adopt that child all the way until they're the age of 18. So the state of California will pay us to do what God has called us to do, yet we still don't do it. Why? Answer that. Answer it for me.
All right. I've been forming my conclusions as I go around church to church trying to knock on their door and get them to open up their doors. I will say I really believe in everything that we're talking about and what Talitha does. I think prevention is huge in this, with foster care too. Dream Center has an amazing foster care prevention program where they go in and take, where there's vulnerable families that are poor and single moms and bring them beds so that they get their kids and their kids aren't taken into the system. I think that we all have a role to play in this, and it's really important, all of it. So, but I do believe that the church needs to be more active in engaging this issue. And I really believe that the main issue, I think there's two issues. I think the number one issue is that we're comfortable, and we're not willing to give up our comfort for the kingdom of God. We're not willing to give up our comfort for these kids. And this is the only country, or one of the only countries in the West, we can choose comfort. we can choose comfort. Like in other countries and cultures, like they can't just choose to be comfortable. They have all kinds of discomfort in their life already. But what I find so often, and we actually see that in the wealthier, more affluent churches, they're less likely to foster usually. We go into the poorer communities and they're like, okay, yeah, I'll bring in another kid. And we're like, you will? Like, you already have 5, and, you don't have any money, and, like, are you sure? And then we go into the wealthy families where they have, like, 5 extra rooms, and they're like, they clearly could take in 6 children, and they're like, oh, no, I can't do this. So I think comfort is the number one thing. I think the second thing is fear. I think there's a fear in the church of, what's going to happen in my life. It's going to make me uncomfortable again. But fear of the unknown, fear that these kids are going to cause so much turmoil in my life that it's going to make my life miserable.
It's a great answer. What about the women who give up their babies, who place their babies for adoption? How should the church think about them? How should we be engaging with them? Because many times we think about, adoption, but we're not really even thinking about the women, right? What are the needs of those women who are placing their children? How do we rally around them? How can we be part of the solution?
I want to also just broaden this conversation about foster care, because I think we do think of always fostering children or babies, and there's enough fear that comes with that. But there is also a whole other population that we never talk about, that we see that walks through our clinic all the time, and it's the teenager who's pregnant, but she's still a foster child, and she's happy to have a baby because it's finally someone that's her own. And she and he are going to do what no one ever did for them, which was take care of this baby. And that population needs a mom and a dad, whether you are housing them or just mentoring them. There are so many ways, and I think the church, because of our comfort, that is scary, especially a pregnant teen. Oh my gosh, are you kidding me? A baby I can somewhat control, but not, this teen. So I just want to say, I think that we have a duty to really start engaging with the world. To really engage with the world, we're talking about all of these things. And as far as loving these birth moms, this is something I'm so passionate about because I have a 4-year-old that was adopted. And we have a very open adoption, and her birth mom has taught me probably more than I've taught her in this relationship. And to me, it's just so beautiful to think about. It's the hardest thing I ever did, leaving the hospital that day with someone else's baby. It was the most traumatic experience, and I have so much empathy and compassion because she did lose a child. And I think we, as the church, often say, well, adoption is so noble, and, if you're really pro-life, you give your baby up. And even just saying that, giving up, is so not right. You're placing a child or making an adoption plan. But anyway, so I think that there is just this incredible opportunity to love birth moms. They're moms. Mother's Day is Sunday. Tomorrow, if you don't know, is Birth Mother's Day. And sending a birth mom flowers, acknowledging that she's a mom. It's so sad on Sunday at church when they would pass the roses, and every birth mom who had a child but the child isn't with her doesn't get a rose, or every woman who had an abortion, or these are just things that we can do as a church to acknowledge. Today, Mother's Day might be a really sad day for so many people. And so finding ways, we have a birth mom support group. There's an incredible organization not far from here. There's some people here from there called True Adopt, a birth mom advocacy group. So I think just sharing birth mom stories also creates a culture of adoption and of life. So, yeah.
Talitha, how would you encourage men to engage in this issue? And what are the rights of men in regards to abortion?
So I'll start with the sadder part is the men have no rights when it comes to abortion. I think the greatest tragedy with this issue is we've shoved men out. I think in this whole feminist movement, which I am possibly a feminist. No, I totally believe in the rights of women, but I think not at the expense of men. And I think that we've done ourselves a disservice to say being a feminist means that you are better than men. And I feel like in this situation, we've said to men, you have no rights if somebody wants to terminate. But if she has that baby, we're going to punish you with child support for 18 years. And so it sends them this message that most men think, well, I don't want her to have that baby because I don't want to be punished with that, instead of talking to him and giving him an equal voice in this. And so I think they need to be asked, how do you feel about this? What do you want? What was the first part of your question?
How do we engage men in the issue?
I think we engage them, by bringing them into the dialogue. I think when a woman comes to us, we always ask, will your partner be joining you? And we meet with him, we ask him, and just getting them to talk. Like I think I said earlier, most men will say to us, they think the loving response is, I'll support you no matter what you do. And that's just goes back to the garden of Adam being silent, versus speaking up and saying what I really want to do. And I think I've told so many men who don't want her to have an abortion, fight for that in a very loving way. I don't want you to have to go through this because I'm worried about the impact that might have on your life, or I'm willing to step up and be a man in this, and loving her through that.
So good. So, you speak about men not having rights. Can you guys speak to us a little bit, for at least the state of California, what are the rights of a minor who wants to have an abortion, or the parents of a minor whose child goes in for an abortion? Are there any rights for the unborn? Are there rights for doctors? I know we're not going to, obviously you're not legal experts to go into the details of the law, but can you tell us a little bit about kind of where that stands, bigger picture?
Yeah, I'll answer, and then if you want to add, at least at our clinic, so anything that has to do with sexual or reproductive health, the minor is basically emancipated. The parents do not have a right to know. So if I believe it's 12 years old. Yes, if they are 12 and older, we are not mandate reporters. If they're 11, then we can report, but 12 years older. So they can have an abortion, they can get birth control, they can get STD testing, and the parents have no rights.
Does that help the girls though, or what's the trauma? I mean, obviously a child, a 12-year-old pregnant's a problem, but what about somebody who would argue, well, her life will be worse at home if her parents find out? What kind of unique problems does it create for children being able to have abortion without their parents knowing?
I feel like my voice has been heard a lot. I'm going to pass this.
Oh, great. Jeez, there's a pattern here. I just want to point that out. That's a good question. So I'm a parent of a 13-year-old boy. No, it's a boy, not a girl. And boys, 13. But nevertheless, we know teenagers, right? We know. Could you imagine? 12-year-old girls. So first of all, the law is just ridiculous on this, right? She can't take a Tylenol at school without a signature. She can't get a tattoo. She can't get her ears pierced. Nothing. Because we recognize that 12-year-olds don't know what's in their best interest a lot of the times, right? They think one thing 1 minute, and the next minute they're like, no, I would never do that. I want the opposite. And yet we're offering them the most important choice. So I think, we can talk about the physical ramifications. One thing I think that's never talked about, and this is heavy. Let's say you have a 12-year-old girl. Let's say you have a 17-year-old girl. Let's say you have a 26-year-old woman. It doesn't matter. When we talk about abortion, what we're literally saying to these women is, you get to make the decision over whether this other human being lives or dies. You get that. You are the only one who gets that. That is heavy for anyone. I don't know that there have been any studies that have been done to say, what does that do to a 13, 14, 15-year-old girl? Because she knows that that's the choice she's being given. She knows it, right? Even if that's the only choice she feels like she can make, even if she's okay with the choice, she knows that that's what she's done. Because if she says she wants to keep it, then it's a baby, and everyone talks about that. And we are not dumb. We know that that's the choice that she's being made. So I really think that it's important that we understand what's really at stake, what really the ramifications are. And I think we don't actually know what effects that has on kids, especially those kids, because they don't have to talk to their parents or any adult. And so very often they don't. They talk to their peers. and then the advice they get is from Teen Vogue that has all kinds of, nice little tchotchkes you can buy your friend who's just had an abortion. And then they're reinforcing for each other, this was a non-event. You're just unpregnant. But in her heart, she knows that's not true.
Wow. Yeah. Something that's been said several times is how for somebody with having an abortion, so often they feel like they have no other choice, right? And I think it just comes once again back to then the church needs to be present offering choices, not just telling somebody what not to do, not just heaping shame, but providing those choices. So that's, how then would somebody engage if they don't like the laws of California, if they don't like how this is set up? How does somebody engage with seeing those change? Is it waiting every 4 years to vote? How is that working out for us? Tell us what we can do if you don't like the laws of California.
All right, I'll get started, but then my sisters have a lot to add here. So yes, voting for sure is a good thing. Right now in California, there's a bill that we can be active on that would say that all of our Cal States and our UCs provide the mifepristone abortion through their on-campus health clinics. So I was in Sacramento a couple weeks ago advocating for legislators and saying, yes, but only, as far as I know, only UCLA and Cal Berkeley are the only two schools in the state of California that actually offer on-campus housing for pregnant and parenting students. So if we want to talk about a choice, right, what are we doing for women who want to be pregnant and parenting on campus? So there are things that you can do all the time in California, actually. You can get involved in all of these kinds of things. I think at a local level, there's a lot that we can do if we're talking advocacy. You can talk to your local legislators. People don't end up in Sacramento or in Washington, D.C. overnight. They start out at our city government and county government, and you can get to know these folks. Some of them are in your churches, right? They hold town hall meetings in the summer. They go to fairs and things like that. They have booths and they have town hall meetings. You can talk there. Because that's the advocacy side. You guys can talk about that
stuff. I think that we have to remember that we're building our life to be an open space where the kingdom of heaven can come. And in the end, we shouldn't trust the government to fix this problem. We need to be involved in everything around us because we're not called to be hiding away in a tent until Jesus comes back. We're supposed to be engaged. Jesus said that there was going to be persecution and it was going to be really difficult. And then he left and said, it's okay, you have the Holy Spirit, not it's okay, go live on the mountain. So I think, we have everything that we need for life and godliness, and yet we're afraid. And I think that the fear issue that you brought up was so important because we need to be fearless in how we engage with the world around us, and ultimately not be afraid of the government, not be afraid of the legislative process, and definitely engage in every area. But ultimately, I think we need to feel responsible, that our neighbor is a part of our responsibility. And, this comes down that we don't think children are our responsibility. We don't think pregnant women are our responsibility. We're just responsible for what we own. But the Lord left the earth for us to be stewarded, and I think we have to change how we see stewardship, that I steward every moment and every person that I come into contact with for the kingdom of heaven to come to earth, and that will be my joy. It won't be a burden, but it will be a joy to see someone change their mind about abortion. It will be my joy to see them come in and weep with me about the one they had so I can pray them through healing. It will be my joy, and I am not a pain avoider. And it's time to stop avoiding pain and to engage with the heart of Christ for the world around us.
Yeah, I think it's doing things that make us uncomfortable. I think it's fostering. I think it's anytime somebody says, I can't believe you would do that, I'm like, oh, I must be doing what God wants me to do in this moment because it shouldn't look comfortable. I think there are some practical things when you see injustice, fighting for that. I was a part of Pepperdine. I went there and said, when I was pregnant, I called here and wanting to see what would happen, and you told me I couldn't live on campus. And so we changed that, and we said, you might be a Christian university, but to tell someone they can't live here pregnant means she has to have an abortion. And the administration listened, and they changed the housing policy. So there's great things like that. But I think fostering and just doing things where other people ask you questions, like we brought in a pregnant girl for 6 weeks, and it was hard. I mean, she was so broken, and it was so amazing. You know, our whole lives changed. My daughter got to see the reality of what it is to practically love somebody that's hurting. So yeah, just living your life that way.
That's good. What other practical solutions would you ladies say people in this room could do to get involved with this issue locally?
Yes. All of us here would love your help. Something that struck me was when Jen said, first you have to know people, you have to have people in your lives that are broken or that are, pregnant or, poor. And I think a lot of times we isolate in our little communities where we're surrounded with people that are like us and, aren't really as in need. And all of these issues that we're talking about here, if the church were to really engage, like for instance with foster care, we counsel and I work with families that are interested in fostering to have an open heart to say, this is an opportunity. This is an amazing opportunity for the church to engage broken families in our city. I mean, the kids in foster care are coming from some of the poorest families, some of the most broken families in our city, and they're in pain and they're in trauma, and they need the church. They need us to engage them and to walk into their pain and say, I'm here and I want to help you and I want to be part of the solution. Not just I want to take your children and I want to adopt them, but we want to pray for your family. We want to help your family. We want to support your family as much as we can. And Talitha does that, and we're trying to do more of that too, of not just, and sometimes it's not possible. Sometimes the parents, there's no, they're not interested in changing, and it's not a safe place for the children. In that case, like the families we need families to step forward to foster and adopt. But we have practical ways. I mean, fostering's really hard. I mean, it's one of the hardest things we've ever done, and we needed support, and we need the body of Christ. We need the church to wrap around foster families, to support them, to pray for them, to help them through the journey. And I know Talitha could use help with her families, and the women need help and support and resources. I mean, and that's what the church is for. Like, we should be engaging these issues and being the solution.
Ladies, this is our final question. We're gonna, in a moment, I have one more question. Then we're gonna transition from this into taking some questions from the audience. So, last chance to write your questions down if you have some. How do we use our voice? How do we in this room? How do those watching? How do we help people move away from the polarization, just the judgment? How do we become bridge builders? How do we become peacemakers? How can we become agents of change on this topic? You're already hitting on some of those things, but final thoughts.
I'd say not make this about feminism from my perspective, just in terms of media. The media is constantly talking about feminism, and this, I think what Talitha said is so spot on. Like, these are about individual people, and we need to refuse the bait of an argument. We need to just let it go and not take it on, because I think that's actually like a pride bait, and we want to win, and we need to refuse winning, and we need to start rescuing and undergirding and strengthening. So
I just think the word that comes to my mind is just humility. Sharing stories of humility and listening more than we speak. Asking somebody what it feels like, not what do you believe or think, but what does it feel like to be you? And what do you think it would feel like to be her or him? I think that's a starting point.
So good. Last thoughts, ladies? Any final?
Sure. I think I just would like to say that I think we can do a both and. So we've talked a little bit today about some advocacy, we didn't really talk about education too much, but we can talk about that, and service as well. And I think that everybody has a comfort level and everybody has opportunities that are offered to them, right? So if you have an opportunity, I think, to do a lot of what, especially these ladies who do the direct service every day, then by all means do that. But sometimes into your life, different opportunities come. And so there are times to speak, and if we speak with humility and speak in the words of Christ, right, and speak as peacemakers. If there are opportunities to educate, then educate in the truth and educate in love. And if there are opportunities to serve, then serve as though you're serving Christ, right? And so I think all of those different opportunities will come to us in different ways. And I would just say that everyone has gifts that were given to them to use for this purpose. And so find those gifts and then use them and hear how God's calling you on your heart, because it may be something that you've never even thought of before, and it'll just touch your heart and you'll say, oh, I could do that. And actually that's going to build the kingdom. That's going to promote life in a way that I haven't even thought of before. Just in your day. Maybe you work in, some corporation or something and you don't realize that you're going to be called to do something through that medium. And so I would just say, just be open all the time, because there are always opportunities when you're praying about it and asking for those opportunities.
One last thought. We've been working with this pastor from Possum Trot, Texas, with Child Share. We've had him come and speak at different churches in LA. And so I just wanted to share this little story about this little church in Possum Trot, Texas, this little bitty town. 200 people or less in this church, and they just got this passion to care for kids in foster care. They felt like God put it on their heart. There's lots of kids. We need to be the solution. And so they started fostering, and they ended up clearing the foster care system in their whole area. They adopted 77 of some of the most difficult to place children in the whole area, and got to the point where they were telling the social services and DCFS, bring us the ones that no one else wants. And social services knew that they were the ones that they could bring, the ones that had been through 10 placements and had been abused and abandoned and neglected. And what I think is so amazing about this story is that when the church rises up and we're the solution, and we're not just saying things with our words, but we're actually with our actions showing Christ, showing love, then the world takes notice. I mean, they don't want to hear from Christians. Like, be quiet, you post something on Facebook and bam, you're going to be attacked. But when you, with your life and our actions, if we become what God has told us to do, which is care for the orphans and widows and the poor and the vulnerable, and their little churches on Oprah Winfrey, they're on the Good Morning America, the Today Show, they're like, what is different about these people? What is different about this church? And I just believe that we can do that if the church would rise up, we could solve so many of these issues. We could solve so many of these problems. I mean, the statistics right now in America, if 1 to 2 people in every church in America were to rise up and foster a child, we would clear the foster care system. There would be no more orphans left in America. And that's so doable. We can do this. So that's
Come on, so good. I just keep hearing Christ in you, the hope of glory, right? Christ in us is the hope for women in crisis. Christ in us is the hope for the unborn. It's the hope for the unwanted. It's the hope for the orphan, and Christ in us. And so, have you guys not been so incredibly impacted by these brilliant women? Thank you guys for joining us this evening. Such a good time.